Als nächsten Sprecher will ich Genosse Chris Marsden aus Großbritannien begrüßen. Wie gesagt, der nationale Vorsitzende der SEP in Großbritannien. Chris ist seit mehr als 20 Jahren der Vorsitzende der SEP in Großbritannien, seit mehr als 30 Jahren Mitglied des Internationalen Komitees der Vierten Internationale. Genossen wissen natürlich, dass er eine zentrale Rolle spielt in der ganzen Frage des Brexit, der Orientierung der europäischen Arbeiterklasse auf die Perspektive der Vereinigten Sozialistischen Staaten von Europa. Zu diesen Fragen, die auch für unseren Wahlkampf von so zentraler politischer Bedeutung sind, wird Chris jetzt sprechen und ich freue mich, dass wir ihn hier haben können. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you all for giving me the honour of addressing this meeting. And I only hope my contribution today is better received than Theresa May's in Florence. At least I'm not going to be lying to anybody. Now, when the UK voted for Brexit on June the 23rd last year, the overwhelming response in official circles on both sides of the Channel was shock. This was supposed to be a manoeuvre by Prime Minister David Cameron that was meant to strip the ground from under the feet of his Conservative Party's nationalist right wing. Instead, it backfired and severely undermined British imperialism's global standing. And despite schadenfreude in Europe's ruling circles of more recent vintage, it also did great damage to the European Union, politically, and also by losing membership of the fifth largest economy in the world. Now, the Socialist Equality Party was not shocked by these developments. We didn't predict the referendum's outcome like soothsayers, but we explained why it had come about and what was at stake. Brexit marks a nodal point in the post-Second World War project of European unification. This was an attempt by the ruling elites of the world, which was led by the United States, to resolve the fundamental contradiction that twice in the 20th century plunged the continent into war, between the integrated character of European and indeed global production and the division of the continent into a patchwork of nations. Now, politically, Europe's integration was based upon the subordination of German imperialism's economic might to a peaceful pan-European project. It was a means, or conceived of as a means, of taming the beast whose appetites had been the immediate catalyst for the most terrible war and horrific crimes the world had ever seen. In the context of the Cold War, moreover, the US imperialism promoted the integration of a capitalist Europe as a bulwark against the Soviet Union, in a kind of political complement to the NATO military alliance. In time, however, as we all know, European integration came to be considered by Europe's rulers not as a collaborative venture with Washington, but a means of competing in the global marketplace against the US and other rivals. And despite the ritualistic proclamations of European solidarity, unity within the framework of capitalism could never mean anything other than the domination of the most powerful nations and corporations, above all Germany, over the continent and its peoples. Rather than national and social antagonisms being alleviated by the European Union, they have again taken on an increasingly malignant form, especially once Europe and world capitalism entered a new period of crisis after 2008. The EU has shed its previous social democratic and liberal pretensions and has emerged ever more nakedly as the instrument through which the ruling elite sets out to impose what is in effect a social counter-revolution against the working class. Germany, France and Britain also exercise their dominant economic role through the imposition of brutal austerity measures. At home, their goal was to strengthen what is routinely described as the global competitiveness of their economies through the destruction of the livelihoods of the working class and the elimination of essential social provisions. Within the EU, they ganged together to impose the most savage measures on their weaker rivals. Greece, Spain, Portugal and Ireland were threatened, blackmailed and all but taken over by the hated troika of the EU, the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and their working populations reduced to desperate poverty. Now, the contending forces in the Brexit referendum were shaped by this eruption of national antagonisms. The Remain and the Leave campaigns both stood for greater austerity, brutal anti-immigration measures and the destruction of workers' rights. The majority view in the Remain camp was that this was best achieved within the EU with a better deal for British imperialism. The opposed camp felt Germany and France were using EU powers to undermine Britain's advantages, its low wages, low taxes, deregulated economy, and above all, the viper's nest of financial parasites in the City of London. They wanted to step outside in order to better emulate the policies of India and of China. Now, the SEP refused to support either rotten camp and called for an active boycott of the referendum. We were and we remain irreconcilably hostile to the European Union, which is a mechanism for the subjugation of the continent to the dictates of the financial capital. But our opposition is from the left and not the right. The SEP refused to aid the efforts of right-wing capitalist politicians to exploit and monopolise legitimate hostility to the European Union. We wouldn't join hands with the Tory party right and the Little England and nationalists of the UK Independence Party, as did the British co-thinkers of Marx 21 and Socialist Alternative. We insisted that British workers couldn't find a way out of the current economic and political impasse based on an embrace of nationalism. The biggest political danger of all arose from the mixing of class banners through the espousal of a supposedly left nationalism that tied the working class to its capitalist masters. Against the torrent of national chauvinism and xenophobia in that filthiest of campaigns, we called on British workers to unite their struggles with workers throughout Europe in defence of living standards and democratic rights. Against the Europe of the transnational corporations, we proposed the United Socialist States of Europe as an integral component of a world federation of socialist states. Everything that has happened since that last year has confirmed the correctness of the stand we took, not just in Britain, of which I could speak for hours, but in Europe and internationally. Brexit, as it turned out, was not an aberration, but set a political pattern that was repeated, of the right wing being able to monopolise and exploit social discontent for its own ends. This was seen above all in the United States with the election of Donald Trump, who has ardently backed Brexit on the basis that Europe's woes are to Wall Street's advantage. But it's also clear in Europe, where the eruption of national antagonisms and the growth of political reaction threatens the unravelling of the EU and indeed many of its nation states amid rising bitter social conflicts. Of course, the German media, like those that in Paris, etc., is full of articles on what a stupid error Britain made with Brexit, portraying the EU as on the verge of rebirth, unified, making something of a recovery, etc. Now, Britain stepped off a cliff, or at least it's dangling its feet over the edge. But those here know that this alternative vision of a Europe of prosperity and progress is a flat-out lie. Every day, Europe is descending into deeper crisis. Almost a third of the EU's population suffers from or is at immediate risk of poverty and of social exclusion because the brutal efforts of Europe's financial oligarchy to enrich themselves still further continues apace. It's a war waged at the expense of Europe's workers. This class war leaves no place, moreover, as Alex has made abundantly clear in his own presentation, for any expression of genuine democratic rule. France is under a permanent state of emergency and is led by a banker cum Napoleon seeking to destroy its remaining labour protections. Spain's Popular Party government is presently arresting Catalan nationalist ministers, raiding political parties, and has sent nearly 10,000 military police to block a separatist referendum that threatens Spain's breakup. And other separatist movements from Scotland to Italy are being spurred on. Now, why is this the case? Why has the crisis of European capitalism assumed such an overwhelmingly reactionary political expression? Why do events in the 21st century increasingly resemble those of the 1930s? It didn't have to be like this, and it doesn't have to be like this. In our statement on the Brexit referendum, we wrote the following, and I'll read it as slowly as I can because I know that some people are relying on a translation. We said, there are occasions in which it would be entirely correct to endorse a vote to quit the EU. Under conditions of a movement of the working class involving mass strikes and appeals for solidarity with the Greek masses and other victims of EU diktats, a vote to leave would acquire an anti-capitalist character. This is not the case today. This is the political responsibility of the pseudo-left groups, all of whom hailed Syriza as a model for waging a struggle against EU austerity. Had Syriza honoured the massive mandate of the July the 5th, 2015 referendum in Greece and taken up a political struggle against the EU, the entire political situation in Europe would have been altered. The Brexit vote will be taking place under conditions where the working class was shaping events instead of right-wing political forces. Now, Syriza, as we know, has its counterparts in every country. Pseudo-left and ex-Stalinist groupings such as Die Linke and its hangers-on. Their primary function is to suffocate the working class, to mouth a few criticisms of austerity, a few pacifist phrases, and then to loyally defend the existing capitalist social order and denounce socialism as a chimera. Now just remember, if you can, the praise they all heaped on Alexis Tsipras and Yanis Varoufakis, right up until the moment they gave the EU everything it wanted and more. Now Syriza is imposing cuts, suppressing strikes, and is more hated even than New Democracy. It has even offered an olive branch to fascists in the cause of stabilising Greece for the global investors. Syriza's Minister of Justice, Nikos Paraskevapoulou, went so far as to declare, and I quote, "We have to decide what we prefer, to include Golden Dawn in the democratic process or remain in a permanent rift with them. In my opinion, we should choose convergence." Now remember this when you are told that supporting Die Linke is a means of combating the rise of the AfD. There are only two possible paths of development today. Europe and the world will suffer a steeper descent into austerity, trade war, political reaction, militarism and war, or the working class will intervene to stop it. For that, workers and youth must be united across all artificial divisions of ethnicity, language, religion and national origin, and be politically prepared to take power. The objective conditions exist for such a struggle to be waged. Workers in Britain, Germany, France are on the same path to social ruin taken by Greece. Many see no answer offered by the old pro-capitalist parties, whether the SPD of Martin Schulz or its supposed left variant like Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. Now the new left parties that were supposed to be an alternative are discrediting themselves by their own lurch to the right. But everything depends upon the building the leadership ready and able to wage a struggle against the capitalist class and its state to a victorious conclusion. The Socialistischen Gleichheitspartei is that leadership. On behalf of your British comrades, I ask everyone here to join it.